Follow the buzzer. Rest in peace. Woo! The best there is, the best there was, and the best ever will be. What you gonna do, brother? Hey, yo.
Can you see me now?
Strategy my Oklahoma ass.
Life sucks, and then you die.
Welcome to the JM Report. I'm your host, IAmGoodOlJM, and this is episode 77. Coming to you from CSP Studios in Tampa, Florida, the birthplace of pro wrestling. And, well, definitely an exciting week in pro wrestling for sure. As I'm doing this, Smackdown hasn't even occurred yet, as this is my usual routine or schedule as far as picking a day of the week as close to the weekend as possible, as intended. But since all the scrambles and mixing up of wrestling shows on TV being arranged as they are today, and again, we have not seen anything like this in nearly, I say, past 15 or 20 years. And I'm not complaining. It's just, well, now I can't really review Smackdown without waiting till the following week to mention it here. So I'm still debating, honestly, because I usually come to the studios on Fridays, and again, that's when everything had already occurred. And yes, a lot of the stories break during weekends, and then I bring it to you the following week. And by then, more details or stories can change or whatnot in said story to share. But yeah, I am heavily considering rescheduling my studio time from Friday to Saturday. And honestly, one of the positives already that I can think about is a little bit more free time in the studio, as it's not as occupied as it would be on a Friday. But depending on other people's projects, hopefully it won't conflict with mine and my studio time. But with that out of the way, got to mention the passing of Rick Bognar. Unfortunately, passed away. Matter of fact, back on September 20th, and it wasn't until about a week later that his brother made it publicly known that the man who used to be known as the fake Razor Ramon and also known as Titan or Rick Titan, he teamed up with Glenn Jacobs, who ended up playing the fake Diesel after the Isaac Yankem DDS character was, well, pretty much after Isaac Yankem DDS's feud with Bret Hart, there really wasn't anywhere else to go. Not that there would have eventually come up with an idea for Glenn Jacobs, who will ultimately go on to become Kane, and then, of course, now the mayor of Knoxville, Tennessee. In that case, it's funny how things work out for you. But unfortunately, it's not so funny is the passing of Rick Bognar, which I had the very fortunate opportunity to meet the man all the way back in 1996. Don't do the math, please. It was during the weekend of Survivor Series in New York City, and they had the Hall of Fame ceremony at the Marriott in Times Square. And For those who are following me on Facebook, well, actually throughout social media, search for Good Old JM. I actually shared a group photo of myself along with quote unquote Razor Ramon and Diesel sitting at a dinner table together. These guys could not have been the nicest and coolest. And I was barely still in high school when this took place. And great time. I didn't realize how young Bognar was. Only 49. I'm probably just realizing that I'm mispronouncing his name. I apologize. And yeah, it was unfortunate, and he couldn't really escape, I guess, the fact that he was branded as, oh, you know, he can't be just the new guy playing Razor Ramon. No, he was the fake Razor Ramon. Whatever substance or leaves that Vince and whomever was smoking at the time, I would like to think that there was at least one person that thought that was a bad idea. You know, it just didn't make any sense. It was just to basically light a fire under everybody's asses that, you know, they realized that they were in a ratings war, that they're losing a lot of their own talent. Very few homegrown talent, but ironically, some of the talent that would jump to WCW began their careers in WCW, or at the very least became well known from WCW. Of course, Scott Hall was in WCW as the Diamond Stud, and Kevin Nash played numerous characters before finally dropping all of them and eventually becoming Diesel. You know, there was Oz, Steel. Too bad he couldn't become Super Shredder before he was Super Shredder. But doesn't take away the fact that this man was only 49 years old at the time of his passing. His brother Ken didn't share too much details as far as what happened. But again, Rick Bognar passed away at the age of 49 back on September 20th, and we only found out just last week that the man is no longer with us. On a personal note, I might have mentioned this a couple of times here, and you know, call me a mark, call me whatever, a smark, or whatever terminologies that really don't make any sense. It's just pretending or trying to be insulting, but whatever. I suffered a loss in my own life this past Monday night while watching Monday Night Raw, and my dachshund dog Batista passed away. He was only 10 years old, fighting cancer this entire year. Unfortunately, it was discovered too late, and there was only so much that the doctors or the veterinarians can do, other than just try to keep them comfortable and painless free as possible, or pain free as possible. And even medicine can only do so much. And I was watching Raw, and he was with his mother and sister, and they were barking. They always bark, but this particular barkings were a little bit different, and that's what caught my attention more than anything than the fact that they're barking. And I called to all of them to come inside, but Batista did not respond. And as I go outside, and he was laying in the grass, and his end was near, and was able to stay with him until it happened. So, needless to say, it was a punch in the gut, and didn't deserve it. I mean, yes, no one deserves this, even if you're a human being or an animal, part of the wildlife. But I just wish I could have done so much more. But I know I'll see him again and his family one day. Okay, took a minute to collect myself here a little bit, and the show will go on. Not confused with the terminology of the show must go on, because I don't ever believe that a show must go on unless completely necessary. But in this case, I'm making the call. It's my show, and it will go on. So as I mentioned earlier, this whole week has just been jam-packed with pro wrestling shows left and right. And that's not even including the ones that take place during the week but don't air until the weekend, such as New Japan, WOW, and AAA, along with many others. Of course, not everyone is fortunate enough to have a TV deal that we can all enjoy. Unfortunately, there's no more Lucha Underground, so imagine that one extra hour during the week. But to many, it's considered historic, and yeah, I understand that. So here we are, nearly 20 years later, pretty much a generation later. Those who are now witnessing or being a part of, let's say, the unofficial Wednesday night wars between NXT and AEW. And if they only heard about the Monday Night War or the Attitude Era. It's funny how WCW never had their own, well, not their own Attitude Era, but a name for their era, so to speak. I guess, who knows? I guess you can call it the NWO era, but eventually it just became so one-sided that even the NWO disparted how many times they attempted one last time back in 2000, and it was just like, enough already. It's passé. But no factions to speak of, not yet anyway, on either side, to seemingly take over. Now, it'll be interesting to see if they do something like that. I hope not, because then, like, they're just rehashing old stories that worked then that may not necessarily work now. It seems like people from my generation and a lot from the current one are more into what's presented inside the ring rather than just, there's a gang out there, or there's a group of people, wrestlers, and just beat up other wrestlers, and that's it. And it's copy and repeat week after week. And it just gets boring and dull so fast. I would like to think that those running AEW who, well, I'm saying this out loud, who are a little bit younger than I am and actually lived through some of them, most of them, behind the scenes during the old Monday Night War, would know now more or less the do's and don'ts of how to conduct themselves moving forward, especially in AEW. NXT is just, get up, go out there and do your thing and bring the house down, which is great as well. So skipping around a little bit or scrambling here in the reviews, I mean, there's just so much to cover. I think I'll just get straight to the match results of each show for now until I, again, figure out exactly how I'm going to squeeze in all these shows together, and especially a show that hasn't even happened yet. Tonight, Smackdown premieres on Fox, and it's a jam-packed show, mostly because of its guest list. This week, they included The Rock, who many believe will not be attending, can't make it mostly due to scheduling conflicts with other movie project he has going on and side projects that he has as well. He does have a production company to run. So the man is busy, to say the least. But he's able to spare some of that time to make an appearance on SmackDown here. Well, tonight, I should say. So as far as the week goes, the battle between AEW and NXT is won by AEW. Now, I'm not just saying that because I thought they had the better show. In hindsight, I believe they did. To me, I think AEW had the better show. Not so much because it's different, not so much because the presentation overall, and I mean, there were a couple of hiccups, but that's expected. They're still fresh, they're still starting. And I say also that they won the week anyways because the ratings came out late last night, and AEW, by a huge margin, had a 1.4 million viewers tuning in. And despite NXT pulling a little tactic that WCW used to do, to have an overrun, in this case of 15 minutes. And honestly, it's a good thing I set up my DVR that way. I just had a feeling, well, for both shows, but I had a feeling one or the other or both were going to pull up such a tactic to get that last minute number jump or boost in the ratings. So I programmed to the end time for about 5 minutes, but little did I know the TV guide, or the way the guide on your cable, depending which one you have, it's already preset to end at a certain time. But I guess the networks got back to all the cable providers and said, no, we're not ending at 10, we're gonna end at 10:15. So it was already extended. So despite that little tactic by NXT or Triple H or whoever it was, they still couldn't get past 900,000 viewers. It was about 850,000? No, let me see if I get the number right. No, correction. AEW did receive a 1.4 million viewers. NXT only pulled in 891,000. And it's been what's the old saying? Teeter-tottering, I guess. Under 1 million viewers. I mean, is it? Well, no one can say that it's the time of the week or even the time of the day. AEW pulled in over 1 million viewers, almost 1.5 million, and NXT came over 1 million. Now, don't want to dwell on this for too long, but were there too much high expectations from NXT. Okay, granted, this is only the first week. This was the first ever head-to-head with an actual legit competitor in AEW. This is not Raw. This is not Smackdown. Is it because the audience is different from the network that views NXT on a weekly basis? Now it's a wider base, and not everyone from Raw and SmackDown, the audience from there is going to tune into NXT and not know who some of the NXT superstars are. Is that possible? Maybe. Was the presentation any different than Raw or SmackDown? Not really. And NXT was trying to get the head start, so to speak, when they opened up their first match for the NXT title, as Adam Cole defended against Matt Riddle. So as I mentioned, I'm just gonna get in straight to the results here, and let's start off with NXT on USA Network. Adam Cole will retain his NXT championship over Matt Riddle, but it's the aftermath of the title match that was the interesting part. So as Adam Cole was celebrating, he got the belt holding up over his head, music playing, and all of a sudden he gets interrupted by Finn Balor, who we have not seen since SummerSlam, as he was defeated by The Fiend. So he comes down the aisle, gets into the ring, goes face to face. The crowd at this point is going crazy. Balor says on the microphone, as of this moment, he is NXT. So one would have to assume that there's going to be a future title match between Adam Cole and Finn Balor. And just ignore the fact that Finn Balor got his ass kicked by The Fiend and have no chance to have payback or revenge unless one challenges the other, and it will be Demon Balor versus The Fiend. Who knows? Those two can have a great match, by the way, and the visuals of The Fiend and the Demon together, it's bound to happen, and it should. So why the move? Maybe as I mentioned before, maybe not everyone knows the entire or some of the roster members of NXT. So putting familiar faces such as Finn Balor, who ironically first started his WWE career in NXT before he jumped to the main roster, and many felt like, great, Balor should not have left in the first place. I can agree with that if they'd done something such as the wildcard rule sooner, where after you start off in NXT and establish yourself well, you're a known name, everyone knows who you are there, make enough buzz for yourself that, when the NXT audience are the ones saying, oh, this guy, he should be on the main roster by now, or at least have a crack at it. Similar to how Sami Zayn debuted himself on the main roster when he went against John Cena. He was still considered an NXT member, but I think Cena was still doing his not open challenge, but I think he even introduced Sami Zayn to his home crowd and had the match. Unfortunately, maybe Sami Zayn was a little bit overzealous and just somehow dislocated his shoulders even before the match started. It was just crazy. But does that mean everyone who was in NXT is going to revert back to NXT from the main roster? No. I think from what the talent they have is enough. Maybe, of course, we got a draft coming up soon. So who knows how much more scramble this thing gonna get. But let's say there is no draft coming up after Hell in a Cell, which is the next episode of SmackDown will be, last I checked, that would be the first night of the draft, and the second night would be the following Monday night on Raw. It's going to be some scrambling for sure going around. And to make this move now, pre-draft, again, it's just try to get a number, try to get attention, try to get people buzzing. Oh shit, Balor's back on NXT. Did it work? Well, we'll see. I mean, that's the whole point of all these changes and decisions to be made. Who knows what's going to happen? More reason for everybody to tune in to see what's next. Io Shirai will defeat Mia Yim via pinfall after Shirai hit her moonsault. And I gotta say, it was quite competitive, more competitive than I thought, at least on paper. I was like, okay, not so much that they would have had a mashing of styles, but I'm still kind of, I guess it's because I'm still trying to get used to Io Shirai as a heel, and she's trying really hard to establish that. Not to convince, but to like, oh no, you're heel. Okay, that's right. Yeah, go ahead, do your heelish things, and let Mia Yim trying to counter and make a comeback, but it wasn't enough here. Johnny Gargano would defeat Shane Thorne via pinfall. Great match, by the way. NXT Women's Championship defended by Shayna Baszler as she retained over Candice LeRae. After winning the tournament last week, LeRae falls short. So who is left for Baszler to face and defeat for the NXT Women's title, with or without any assistance from her other members of the Four Horsewomen? In a very physical but short match, Pete Dunne defeated Danny Burch. During the celebration, Pete Dunne was attacked from behind by Damian Priest. So there's your next few there. At one last shot at regaining their titles, the Street Profits unfortunately fell short to regain their NXT Tag Team titles over the Undisputed Era. And not all of it, matter of fact, I don't think none of it was shown on TV, but if you go to their social media pages, WWE has put up an exclusive footage of post-match where the Street Profits were given their proper send-off from the audience. As we all know, it was just a matter of time, making all these appearances on Raw specifically, that they were going to make the jump. So the Street Profits, with a little bit of help from Johnny Gargano, were given the proper send-off as they're now being promoted, I guess, to Raw. But again, who knows after draft where they're finally going to end up. Should probably add a little bit more detail to this. So the high-low was delivered to Ford as the champions retained the titles. And during the celebration, of course, Adam Cole came down to assist in the celebration after the match. Standing on stage, Adam Cole once again holding up the championship belt, only to be stared down by Tommaso Ciampa, who makes his return. Many people thought his return would have become a little bit later. But the show ended with Ciampa and Adam Cole staring down at each other. So with Finn Balor back, basically staring down Adam Cole, and now Ciampa back, staring down Adam Cole. So what is the dealio? Is there going to be a number one contenders match between Balor and Ciampa, which would be a freaking awesome match? Would it be a triple threat? I believe the next takeover is War Games. So, interesting. Now, does that necessarily mean that Adam Cole has to be in War Games itself? No, especially if he's going to defend the title against either Ciampa or Balor, or against both. Who knows? But definitely things have been mixed up enough, or at least over NXT side of things, to keep you intrigued. But surprisingly, I give a closer enough number in the rating. And no, everything's not about the ratings, but at least it shows the audience's interest. And not all of them are AEW fans that watch NXT and vice versa. But when it comes down to numbers as far as who's watching what and for how long, Are you going to call the ratings a liar, or whomever's the one that's providing them? Especially when there are multiple sources who come up with the exact same number. I'm just saying. But a great showing on the part of NXT. I think what happened here, and yes, I didn't mention the promo that the Velveteen Dream put over Roderick Strong, excuse me. Oof, that name escaped me. And challenging him into a rematch for the North American title. And there were other backstage interviews and promos and a lot of video packages. And AEW did the same thing, not to mention, which was interesting because I come to hear that not everybody got to see this, but at least on the AEW side of things, when they went to commercial, they'll do a split screen. In other words, commercial on one side and the wrestling show on the other. So we'll continue, which I'll get into in just a little bit. And I think it was promoted as with limited commercial interruptions. Again, just another tactic where, like, you know, you're going to see the entire show, or the majority of it, without commercials, which is, again, sounds good on paper. But if your fill-ins are just promos and interviews backstage, which I'm not saying does not belong on the show, but just get to the point. Get to the point, because you know damn well your competitor, more or less, when they start picking up momentum even more, they're going to get the flow of things and like, oh, they're doing an interview. Come on, let's get another match out there, or do the surprise run in now, or whatever. Again, it's no coincidence, and it wasn't an accident that NXT started off with their main championship match. Would have been a little different how they would have introduced Finn Balor back, and of course Tommaso Ciampa, but there could have been a variety of ways they could have done that. Matt Riddle, Adam Cole, main event, the last match of NXT, plus with that extra 15-minute overtime. The match still could have went on the way it did. You have Finn Balor stare down in the ring with Adam Cole. Balor makes his little speech about that he is NXT from this moment on. The crowd goes wild, and all of a sudden you hear Tommaso Ciampa and his music playing in the background. So you have Balor and Cole in the ring looking around all confused, like, wait, what's this now? I thought this was my time. And both men look back down the aisle on stage, and you see Ciampa just standing there, just staring a hole through both guys. And granted, he's probably there for the NXT title, but would you know that right away? Because you got Balor back, now you got Ciampa. Does Ciampa got a chip on the shoulder for Balor, or is he gunning for that title from Adam Cole? Same result, right? Same or similar ending. Either way, the fans are asking questions. So what's going to happen next? Who's going to face who for the title, and mixing, matching, and all this stuff? But great effort on NXT, don't get me wrong. And I think more than likely they're going to, if they haven't already, have some changes where the promos, again, you can have them, but simplify them. You know, get to the point quicker. Because at AEW, they had little to no promos or interviews. They tried, but you know what? It was part of post or the pre-match. So that way it was a more steady flow of things, of what to see and expect during that moment in time, to see what to look out for during those spots. And considering how it ended, it's like, okay, I think they got something here. And at least it left me asking more questions, which I eventually got answers to as the week went on. So for the first time ever in nearly 20 years, TNT has brought back pro wrestling to their network. After the fall of WCW, we have AEW, All Elite Wrestling, on Wednesday nights. And I guess for historical purposes, and I guess bragging rights in a sense, but depending who you ask. But Cody versus Sammy Guevara was the first match on the official debut of AEW on TNT. Great match from start to finish. A lot of back and forth. Hell, even Brandy took a bump after Cody was going for a dive through the ropes. That little slickster, Sammy pulled Brandy in between them, and she took the full brunt of it, landing in the barricade. She's fine, folks. Landing against the barricade right in front of Jay and Silent Bob. But it was Cody at the end who got the win after a hard-fought match with a small package. After the match, one of the commentators, Tony Schiavone, who made his return back to pro wrestling alongside Jim Ross and Excalibur, who are the commentators for AEW, was trying to conduct a post-match interview with Cody, only to be attacked from behind by AEW World Champion Chris Jericho, who, as we all know, Cody has become the #1 contender for the title, and just obliterated Cody from ring post to ring post, set up 2 steel chairs that were padded on the outside of the ring, and powerbombed through them. Now, here's what's interesting. Down here in my neck of the woods, I was able to see all of this, the beatdown from start to finish, with AEW doing a split screen for commercials. For some reason, especially up in the between the Northwest and even further out west, a lot of people did not see the same thing. I believe it started just as Jericho began his beatdown, and shortly after they went to commercial, only to come back from said commercial, and the beatdown was just ending. So there were a lot of complaints like, wait a minute, you got to see the beatdown, but we didn't? Well, it's not our fault, for one. But it's interesting at the same time, but why is it set up like that? I'm not too deep into the TV business to know how these decisions are made, or maybe their marketing wasn't capable of that. Who knows? Or the cable provider. Who knows? There's a bunch of different varieties as far as how and why this thing could not take place. And for those who couldn't see AEW in its entirety, there were a lot of split screens commercials throughout the show. Maybe once it was a full-fledged commercial, once or twice. But as far as we know, there was nothing going on. And even the famous, well, this happened later on in the night, but even the famous Chris Jericho moment, who literally called timeout in the ring, grabs the microphone and says, I just want to know one thing. Who threw this wiener in the ring? And it got a huge wiener chant. And NXT again did the same thing for the most part. But then again, it was one example was during the Shirai Mia Yim match. Do a split screen, and then for 1 or 2 specific commercials, they'll go full screen and then cut back to the Full Sail University. Like, why? It was already split screen. Why do full screen commercial only to split it again and then go back to full screen wrestling matches? Anywho, I'm sure all of this will be sorted out eventually, and everyone else can enjoy the full story. Well, not the full story, but the full shows of each NXT and NXT AEW next week. But continuing on with AEW's debut show, Dynamite, by the way, MJF took on Brandon Coulter. At the end, MJF was victorious after applying the armbar, forcing a tap out. And Coulter, well, I don't know too much about the guy, I got to be honest, but I see a good future for the man. In a match that we were denied at Double or Nothing, we finally got it here, at least on AEW, as Hangman Page took on Pac, the old Aaron Neville from NXT. But surprisingly, it was Pac that was victorious via submission, making Page tap out, which I thought was, wow, okay, this man is establishing. Oh, that's something else I forgot to mention, what I like that AEW is doing. When they're introduced and walking down the aisle, and you have their and their nameplates pop on screen, they have their win and loss record right next to their names in singles and tag teams. And I believe these win and loss records, as far as AEW goes, began all the way back from All In. It's smart, yeah, because when you have constant rematches after rematches against the same two people for a title, you say, okay, well, it's like tic-tac-toe, although you can't find ways to win there. But even in tic-tac-toe, for the most part, no one wins, no one loses. How? Because in wrestling championship matches, or the former champion has invoked his rematch clause. So we'll see them next time at the other pay-per-view. Okay, so the champion gets his title back. So, okay, so now that former champion is invoking his rematch clause. Well, okay, we'll see at the next pay-per-view. And it's a never-ending cycle. Once in a while, you add a triple threat or a steel cage and someone else gets involved and so-and-so cost me the match and the title, so now I'm going after you. So now you're away from the title picture. And the champion moves on to face whomever at the next pay-per-view finally, but that usually takes through the 3 to 4 months after the fact, so what's the point? But speaking of championships, AEW has finally crowned their first ever AEW World's Women's Champion. And yeah, they can't call her the World's Women's Champion because, at least in WWE, they don't have any World Champions anymore. I mean, the WWE title still says World Heavyweight Champion, but he's not announced as that. As far as the women's division goes, you're a brand's champion. You're either Raw or SmackDown Women's Champion. But here, it was Riho taking on Nyla Rose in the old-fashioned, and everyone's saying this, David versus Goliath. And it was. It really was. Despite having a couple of botched spots from Rose, thankfully no one was hurt. But Riho is your new AEW World's Women's Champion. After 3 double knees, finally, Riho got the pinfall over Rose, and he's your now Women's Champion. Maybe rematch, but the size differential was just amazing. And yes, definitely a clash of styles here, but you know what? It was entertaining as all hell, and I'll definitely pay to see these two go at it again. Then it was finally time for your main event 6-man tag team match. For months, Chris Jericho has teased that he would have 2 mystery partners. Who were they going to be? Now, of course, it was announced the day before during the pre-show, or the let's call it a pre-show. Tony Schiavone provided a pretty much a recap up to this point in AEW's history and everyone's involvement for the first episode of Dynamite. And it was announced there that it will be Ricky. Oh my goodness. It will be Santana and Ortiz. I was thinking of Ricky Santana. Excuse me. That it would be Santana and Ortiz, the old LAX from Impact Wrestling. That will be Chris Jericho's mystery partners. It was obvious to some when they debuted back in All Out, and makes sense as they took on the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega. Now, were Santana or Ortiz always going to be the mystery tag team partners? Because at the time, even when this was announced months ago, no one had any clue about Santana and Ortiz's issues with Impact Wrestling and their contracts and whatnot. Or maybe they did. Maybe they did and just kept it away from, quote unquote, the dirt sheets, so that way when it finally happened, it won't be too obvious or too surprising that, well, these guys jumped literally a week after they were released or the contract expired from Impact Wrestling, that they were showing up at AEW's pay-per-view. But shortly after the match began, Jon Moxley, the old Dean Ambrose, attacked Kenny Omega from behind, and they will fight through the crowd all the way back to seemingly a VIP area, dining little lounge area in the back of the arena. A cool place, too. It was a nice bar set up there. Got flat screens all over the place. So the attack ensued, and Ambrose would deliver dirty deeds onto a glass coffee table. And it sucked. Thankfully, Moxley kept his vest on. Who knows how much glass would have cut him, assuming that it wasn't gimmicked. But it looked like Moxley took the full brunt of that shattered glass rather than some going to Omega. Although Omega was thankfully protected well. But this left a 2 on, I'm sorry, not 2. 2 on 3. I was going to say 2 on 1. But 3 against 2 back in the ring as the referee never bothered to call for the bell. The attack happened right in front of the referee. But the excuse was, well, Kenny Omega was not the legal man, so it was okay to be attacked by a person who's not even involved in the match. How many times have we... It's wrestling, folks. It's not supposed to make sense. So at the end, it was Chris Jericho, Santana, and Ortiz defeating the Young Bucks. And not Kenny Omega, because he was done for the rest of the night until the very end, where once again we see a beatdown, but only this time the heels will be joined by Jack Hager, the old Jack Swagger. Dustin Rhodes would try to attempt to make a save, but he was outnumbered, and all the baby faces were laid out by AEW champion Chris Jericho, Jack Hager, and Santana and Ortiz. So a great showing. Not sure if it was great to see Jack Swagger back, or Jack Hager, which I got to get used to calling him. And how he's now going to balance, apparently, his career between Bellator and AEW. Which, ironically, two feuding networks between Paramount Network and TNT. So that's interesting. But a great showing by AEW. Whatever promos and video package that they had was very short and to the point. I don't think either one went over 5 minutes, as some of WWE promos can go as long. And I'm really trying not to nitpick that, but if you really think about it, a lot of the video packages filled with stuff that we already know. Not to mention that the commentators are going to keep shoehorning that in over and over again during the match. And really provide nothing else. It's, this is why I listen to the commentary from Raw and Smackdown, even though they changed the commentators there, but it just gets dull. We saw this in the video package. Why are you repeating that? We know it's a title match. It's a freaking hashtag in the corner of the screen. We know what's going on. And in comparison to, say, reactions, when Moxley DDT'd Omega through the table, JR, he didn't have an orgasm like he used to. I mean, it was still more of an authentic reaction. But at least it didn't sound like Cole or Graves, where they thought it was the end of the world, or that's it. It's Armageddon, people. Like, tone it down. And I'll get to the commentating team from Raw in just a minute, but between the two, I felt AEW did have the better show. And we've seen everything we could have seen from NXT. I personally was expecting a different presentation. Forget the order of the matches. And if you're going to have one or two surprises or reappearances or returns or whatever. But it was the same thing. No effort as far as making some changes. It doesn't take away the fact. I'm not talking about the wrestling matches. I'm not talking about the talent. Just the way it was presented. Just the way of the oh my goodness, what's the word? The product and the presentation, the production. That's the word, production. If Vince McMahon truly has no say or does not have his fingerprints anywhere near NXT, then why the hell did NXT adapted the zooming in and out bullshit camera angles? That wasn't always there if you think about it. Go back at least a year, maybe less, on NXT when it was still on the network. It still is, but I'm saying new episodes. That zooming in and out seizure effect was not always there. That's a nitpick. But again, folks, don't take my word for it. You don't have to agree or disagree with my opinion. That's fine. You're entitled to your own. I agree that AEW did have the better show this week. And even if the ratings were the opposite, okay, the wider audience would disagree. That's fine. And NXT ended up having the million viewers as opposed to the nearly 900,000 that they did. And AEW could have ended up with less than 1 million views. But because there's a new product, it's a new company, not everyone got to see or know or even watch any of their pay-per-views, other than there's another wrestling company that's not even next to or going head-to-head with Raw and or Smackdown. I'm curious to see if anyone's going to budge from all this as far as getting away from what, because Thursday night is wide open. So if anyone budges or thinks that they can't handle it anymore going to competition or whatever, not that I guarantee it, but I wouldn't be surprised if I see either NXT or AEW to say, you know what, we tried Wednesday nights, let's see how Thursday goes, since everything else is taken up. But at the end of the day, and like everyone's saying, the fans are the one that wins, hands down, because they are now alternatives. Even if it's just one from now, Impact Wrestling doesn't make their return to TV, to Access TV to be precise, for another few more days after Bound for Glory. So there's going to be even more wrestling alternatives to watch. So rest assured, all these podcasters, including myself, have a lot to talk about, mostly covering all these TV shows in detail. I would have to find a new way to do that myself. But at the end of the day, it's a great time to be a wrestling fan again. Over on Raw, it began Rey Mysterio Jr. about to cut a promo for his upcoming Universal Championship match against Seth Rollins, only to be interrupted by Brock Lesnar. Lesnar snatches the microphone away from Mysterio, gives to Heyman, only for Mysterio to snatch it back from Heyman. And Mysterio, speaking in Spanish, was trying to say, who do you think you are? But never got a chance to finish that statement as Lesnar just brutalized Rey Mysterio, delivering an F5. Not once, but twice. Just left him laid out. Now, this entire time, we have Dominic. Is it just going to be Dominic or Dominic Mysterio? I guess we'll find out. But he was sitting ringside during all this and didn't know what to do other than just see and bear witness to his father get his ass handed to him. So he made no motion, no gesture, but Lesnar sees him. He jumps out of the ring, does a bit of a stare down. Dominic sits back down in his chair, and in one felt swoop, Lesnar just snatches Dominic out of his chair, throws him over the railing, and damn near almost dropped him on his head and his shoulder, his back. Couldn't really tell, but Lesnar, with quick reflexes, reacted to it immediately, as it appeared as Lesnar was going to deliver an F5 on the outside of the ring. But instead, because Dominic either slipped out or Lesnar lost his grip, but catches him in a body slam position and instead drives Dominic into the ring post. Throws him into the ring. Dominic, poor kid, he gets a German suplex and flies across the ring. Mysterio tries to stop this by grabbing Lesnar's ankles, only to receive an F5 himself. Lesnar leaves, only to come back, delivers another F5, only to Dominic. It was just a back and forth, on-air, live homicide to this poor kid who Jerry Lawler kept screaming, he's only a teenager, he's 22 years old. If he was a teenager under the age of 18, Lesnar would be arrested by now. I don't care who has to sign what waiver in order for Lesnar, a man in his 40s, to German suplex a teenager all over the ring and not have child services on your ass. So that was overkill by Jerry Lawler, among many nitpicks from Raw this week. But no, Dominic is 22 years old. He's at least 6 feet tall, if not a little bit taller. maybe 6'1", who knows? But he's a grown-ass man. Still young, but still a grown-ass man. So what happens? Well, Mysterio elected not to compete for the Universal title picture versus Seth Rollins as he attended to something more important. That's the well-being of his son. Understandably so. And we'll just, we wouldn't get an update really. We would just see Dominic getting loaded into the ambulance backstage as he, both and Mysterio, jumped into the back. The doors closed and we see Mysterio remove his mask. I mean, we've all seen what he looks like now. And recent social media pictures. Hell, we've all seen him when he first unmasked. What was it, back in 96? He still looks very young. But I get it. The Lucha Libre tradition, you're not supposed to do that. But this, again, all of this can be forgiven and accepted because of the circumstances. His son just got beat the shit out of him by a much larger man. But back inside the arena, we have Sasha Banks taking on Alexa Bliss. Banks would win after making Alexa think that Bayley was standing behind her, only to roll her up by kicking her in the knees and get the 3 count. Keep in mind, this entire time, Becky Lynch was at the commentator's table for maybe a minute, only to stand on top of the table for the rest of the match. Tipping up her wrist, tipping up her fist. I'm surprised she didn't cut circulations to her fingers, but she was just taping up. Every time they cut back to Becky, taping up. Eventually, Banks and Lynch will have a confrontation in the ring. Banks would run off. Lynch would say on the microphone that you made it personal, but inside Hell in a Cell, I'm going to make it painful. It's a pretty badass line, I got to admit. For the Raw Tag Team titles, SmackDown's Heavy Machinery, who somehow deserved or earned a title shot with an unaired match or an unaired promo, but they got a title shot versus Robert Roode and Dolph Ziggler. Well, again, this is pre-draft, so had Heavy Machinery won the titles here, would they have still become SmackDown teams or Raw teams? Who knows? But they fell short as Roode and Ziggler will retain their titles over Heavy Machinery. Then we get to one of the other interesting parts of the entire Raw show. Miz TV, who had Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair as their his guest. There was a little bit bantering back and forth as far as who's the greatest, who's more legend than the other, even though both men praised each other. And Flair, bit of a heel. I think Flair, between the two, Flair was a much better heel and always was. So instead of having one more match, as the crowd was chanting between the two, and let's face it, folks, if you don't remember, Hulk Hogan quietly retired a few weeks ago, and it was during the Raw Reunion week where he had a sit-down interview with Steve Austin on his podcast. That's when and where he announced it. So Hulk Hogan is retired, and even if he looks great physically, can he go again? Probably not. Having one too many botched back surgeries, I don't know if he's ever bumped ever since. But his biggest signature move, his finishing move, really, is his leg drop. You really think he can withstand another compressing of the spine by landing on his ass, even if it is one more time? No. Just leave it into your imaginations. And plus, Hogan is returning to 2K games next month with 2K20. WWE 2K20 as a downloadable character. So you can relive. There's one more match there all you want against Ric Flair and whomever. But it was announced here that at the next pay-per-view in Parts Unknown on Halloween of all dates, which is, was that a Wednesday? No, it's a Thursday. Excuse me. It's a Thursday. So chances are this, and that will be post-draft too. So I would imagine this will be more of a Raw show and maybe a handful of SmackDown people, depending who the Prince wants to see there. And if they're expected or advertised to be on SmackDown the next night on November 1st, they'll more than likely have to catch the red eye back to the States. But back to Miz TV, it's here that it's revealed that there will be a Team Hogan and a Team Flair 5-on-5 tag team match. Now, people saying, "Oh, it's a Survivor Series match." Like, well, they didn't mention anything about elimination rules yet. But that in the next few weeks leading up to Crown Jewel 4, Vince McMahon's return or some shit, Hogan and Flair had to choose their members for each team, and we got introduced to some of them here. As team captain for Team Hogan is Universal Champion Seth Rollins. And Ric Flair immediately responded by introducing his team captain being Randy Orton. So since everybody knew Mysterio was out of the picture, Orton challenged Seth Rollins for the title right there and there. And it's hilarious how both men were waiting for the ring crew to roll up the carpet to get out the ring and remove all the stool chairs. I think at first they were trying not to show it, but then like, screw it, just get a wide shot from the hard camera. And you see the carpet being carried out to the back. But the match never really happened, even though the referee did show up. But King Corbin came down and tried to attack Seth Rollins, only to be saved by, of all people, Rusev. So Rusev now is a babyface? After that nonsense with Maria and her baby and Mike Kanellis and everyone asking, where's Lana, which we did get an answer to on this show. But, yeah, from one week to another, I guess because, he's a new sworn-in citizen, Rusev, that is. Congratulations, by the way. He is now a babyface and has joined Team Hogan. So now we have Randy Orton, captain of Team Flair, along with King Corbin, taking on Team Hogan, led by team captain, Universal Champion Seth Rollins, and Rusev. So each team has 3 more members to fill in slots, and we will find out again as the weeks go by. The Viking Raiders took on the OC in a rematch from last week, though it was a good match, but same result here as the Raiders. The Raiders were victorious over the OC. And probably the match of one of the matches of the night, I should say. Ricochet took on Cesaro after Cesaro was bad-mouthing Mysterio and his kid backstage. Ricochet took exception to this and challenged them to a match later on. And in honoring Mysterio, Ricochet will win using the West Coast Pop as he defeated Cesaro here. I am just so tongue-tied today. We have a new episode of the Firefly Funhouse, and all of the puppets are scared of the Hell in a Cell match between The Fiend and Seth Rollins for the Universal title. And we see on there Rambling Rabbit, and they all said they were scared to death, and Rambling Rabbit literally dies of fear. I'm sure we'll see him next week. But Bray Wyatt comes in, tries to revive Rambling Rabbit, to no avail, and says, and just tosses him aside. I can only imagine his eulogy. But once again, hyping up the match between The Fiend and Rollins for the Universal title inside Hell in a Cell this Sunday night. And in the second match of the night, this one was probably better than the previous one. For the United States Championship is AJ Styles taking on Cedric Alexander. For many who think that Cedric is still being buried, do you think anyone getting buried will get this much TV time, not to mention title matches nearly every week? Granted, he's losing all these matches just like he did this past Monday for AJ Styles to retain his U.S. title. But it's not a burial. At least I don't think it's a burial. Getting all this TV exposure, not to mention title matches on said TV shows, how can it be a burial? Granted, again, I mentioned that he's losing all these matches, but it's the TV exposure that counts at the end of the day. I mean, if you think about it, I would like to also think that there will be a happy ending of sorts for, not that kind, But happy ending source for Cedric at the end. Doesn't have to necessarily win the U.S. title from AJ Styles, but the fact that he gets redemption. Last week, there was an attempt at this as Cedric attacked AJ Styles on the stage, which led to the match here this week. But unfortunately, Styles, well, fortunate if you're a Cedric Alexander fan, Styles will retain the U.S. title here on Raw, which I thought was the match of the night, just ahead of the Ricochet and Cesaro match. But then we get to Lacey Evans taking on Natalya in yet another rematch. Short and to the point, a bit awkward, but it just took Evans to rake the eyes of Natalya and roll her up, pulling the tights to get the win. And only after the match would Evans deliver the women's right. Maybe Evans did get too much too fast too soon. So in our new main event for the Universal title, Seth Rollins defends against Rusev. As the match progressed, Rollins found himself on the outside of the ring. And keep in mind, this entire time, Randy Orton and King Corbin were on stage observing their counterparts for Crown Jewel at the end of the month. Before I continue, I should mention here, no, it was not shown on TV, as some people thought, but the throne chair for King Corbin. When we got back from commercial and we see a promo, and then it cuts back into the ring live for Rusev as a close-up. He's laughing his ass off, and you can, if you know, read the lips. You hear him saying, "What happened?" That's because we just missed the throne chair of Corbin collapsing as he sat on it. There's footage of this online now from the fans' perspectives. Barely a second or two sitting on the chair, and he just collapsed. Corbin didn't tumble and fall, but he caught his balance and able to stand up right away. Randy Orton could not help himself. It just bursted out laughing, breaking character. And so that explains why Rusev was asking what happened. And we cut back to the stage for the entrance of Seth Rollins, and we see said chair already in a pile heap, which led a lot of us to ask, wait, why is the chair on stage broken? And if it's just broken, why is it on stage to begin with? Again, because we just missed it. And it wasn't shown on TV. And Rollins is even asking what happened. He's pointing and mocking. And it's a different camera angle where we see it once again, Orton laughing his ass off. So that explains that mystery. Again, it's on YouTube if you haven't seen it. A few fans' perspective from their cell phones, and they uploaded it on social media. But the match itself didn't take too long. As I mentioned, Rollins found himself on the outside of the ring, only for the returning Bobby Lashley's music hits, and he's on stage posing. He's pointing towards Rusev, and then Lashley motions backstage several times. I think there was a miscue on how much time was left on the show, and it's always awkward because if you're not too good at playing things off, then you're just gonna be standing there looking like, well, what are you doing? Pretty much like a fool. So at least 3 times that I remember counting, Lashley motions back towards the gorilla position, waiting, and all of a sudden, Lana appears. Now, Rusev was asked earlier in the night about where's Lana, what happened to Lana. He gave no answer. So the impression here that there's trouble in paradise at the Rusev-Lana homestead. But here she is coming out to her music, gets arm in arm with Bobby Lashley. They're hugging, and something, I mean, when it comes to real life marriages being involved like this and storylines, I cringe. But everybody agreed, and everybody said, oh, it's just business, it's just for the show, blah, blah, blah. Lashley and Lana just make out like as if 2 horny teenagers found each other in the back alleyway somewhere after high school. She wrapped his legs around him, and It went on for quite a while, folks. And Rusev, back in the ring, just looked very distraught. The match ultimately was tossed out because there's more. The Fiend hits the ring, takes out Rusev, and eventually takes out, once again, Seth Rollins. So this has been the copy and paste repeat for The Fiend and Rollins to just hit the ring at the end of the show. Mandible claw, screaming, the laughing, the strobe lights. Well, the lights that are just being swung around, really. And that's the end of Raw. All roads leading to Hell in a Cell. And if you can believe it, there are only 3. That's right, 3 matches advertised for this Sunday's Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. Granted, an argument can be made that for the past couple of weeks they were gearing up for the Fox deal and NXT debut and so on and so forth. But holy crap, only 3 matches announced and advertised this Sunday. As mentioned, Seth Rollins defends the Universal title against The Fiend inside Hell in a Cell. Becky Lynch defends her Raw title, or Raw Women's title, against Sasha Banks inside Hell in a Cell. And Daniel Bryan and Roman Reigns team up to take on the old Bludgeon Brothers of Luke Harper and Eric Rowan. I'm pretty sure we're going to get a SmackDown women's title match between Bayley and Charlotte Flair. It wasn't officially announced, but, let's face it, that's what things were heading. But it's just mind-boggling, so close to the pay-per-view. And this was the go-home show, the season premiere of Raw. My God, if you still got this show DVR'd back home, rewatch it for the full 3 hours. Take a shot every time they mention proudly of the season premiere of Raw. Oh my God, was that overkill? He's only a teenager. Shut the hell up. Ugh. Anyway, Hell in a Cell this Sunday night. I'll have the full review next week on the JM Report. Probably won't mention the result or match results as far as what's going to happen tonight on SmackDown, but rather than point out what happened as far as what did The Rock do and say, what did Austin do and say, Sting, Lita, and or Ric Flair, all these other expected Hall of Famers and legends to appear. Speaking of The Rock, anyone else catch this? Apparently, Randy Orton has challenged The Rock nearly a year in advance to next year's WrestleMania. Orton put out a tweet earlier this week, say that 3 times fast, saying, "Rock, I will see you." Excuse me, try that again. "I see you will be at SmackDown on Fox this Friday. How about you and I have a discussion about who's the greatest 3rd generation of all time, and we answer that question April 5th in Tampa at WrestleMania 36. Our Viper's sense of smell is unmatched. I smell what you're cooking." Funny how we never got this match sooner, but then again, just as Randy Orton was getting himself established, and between the time he broke away from Evolution and became world champion, Rock was already heading out the door, unfortunately. Unfortunately as a wrestling fan, but you can't question or take away the fact that Dwayne Johnson has been very successful out of the ring. Maybe even more so had he in the ring. Who knows? It's one of those what ifs. And curious to see if Dwayne Johnson has ever answered that question, but definitely would have been interesting to see how things would have been different. There's some legal troubles, unfortunately, for Eric Angle, the brother of Kurt Angle, who we've seen at least twice in WWE, but basically just to play Kurt Angle's clone one time at Survivor Series against The Undertaker for the Undisputed title. there was the old switcheroo as Kurt Angle was bumped outside the ring. He crawls in the bottom of the ring. Taker comes out. He reaches in. He grabs an Angle and pulls out what we all think is Kurt Angle, only to deliver the last ride to Eric Angle as the referee began the 3 count, only to realize that's not the same man. And from behind came Kurt Angle, rose up the Undertaker, and steals the win to retain the title. The second time we saw Eric Angle was a week before WrestleMania 19, as Smackdown was going to give away their main event for WrestleMania, Brock Lesnar versus Kurt Angle for the title. Around that time period, it was concerns for Kurt Angle's neck injuries, as he sorely needed surgery to repair it. So instead, they pulled the curtain over us, the fans, as Lesnar's entrance was being commenced. The lights darkened inside the ring, especially, and we last saw Kurt Angle kneel in the corner with his hoodie on. And replays will show during the darkness another switcheroo, and Eric Angle is the one that's kneeling in the corner. And without waiting for the bell to ring, Lesnar grabs Eric Angle, as we will find out, delivers an F5, pins him, and realizes that it's not Kurt. And once again, the old roll up and steal a win to retain the title, as Kurt Angle ran away from Brock Lesnar, leaving poor Eric to be destroyed by the Beast. He's literally his stunt double. But yeah, hot water for Eric Angle, as CBS broke the news that he, along with 3 other men, are charged with conspiracy to distribute controlled substances and conspiracy to import controlled substances. Not a good look if you're the brother of Kurt Angle, a WWE superstar. Well, allegedly, Eric Angle has been importing steroids from China and then sell them via the dark web. And he would distribute said items through Federal Express or UPS under false names, and part of a group, Quantum For, or Quant For Them, is a part of a drug trafficking group that's been kept eyes on by several agencies. This is on the heels after earlier this year, Eric Angle was charged, but later they were dropped. But earlier in the year, Eric Angle was charged with assault by slamming one of his wrestling students onto the mat by his throat. So this just broke yesterday, and no update as of now, but either way, it's not good for Eric Angle, and hopefully he gets a good lawyer. But I got some more notes from the AEW NXT front. Interestingly enough, PW Insider reached out to WWE asking for comments about their thoughts of AEW's performance as far as Dynamite goes this past Wednesday night. And according to PW Insider, they were given a statement. An unknown WWE official says, "Congratulations to AEW on a successful premiere. The real winners of last night's head-to-head telecast of NXT on USA Network and AEW on TNT are the fans. We can expect Wednesday nights to be competitive and a wild ride, as this is a marathon, not a one-night sprint." Classy. It's a classy thing for WWE to say. But on the flip side, Jericho has a different insight, what he believes, what the statement is really saying. And that is that, WWE is scared. Otherwise, they will not have put out such a statement and acknowledged the fact that, you guys just had your asses handed to you as far as the ratings go. And, well, after all, this is a guy who was working for them for so many years. As Jericho had an interview with Complex and was told and asked about WWE's statement. And this is what Jericho had to say in reference to the statement. Jericho says, they kind of started this war. And the very first night they got destroyed. Big deal. It's our first debut. Great. But they have to come back and say, it's a marathon, not a one-night sprint. Who's ever said it's a one-night sprint? It's not a war for us. Now, we're placed in one. And we're going to kick ass because we're going to do what we do very, very well. There's a little bit of arrogance towards us. That's now gone. And Jericho would point out the fact that WWE or NXT was embarrassed in referencing to the ratings that would come out on Thursday. So again, this coming from a man who worked with them and for many years and will know the ins and outs and how certain statements, when made, what they really mean in context. Regardless, whether it's for PR purposes or the fact that, like, shit, we didn't expect this. But at the end of the day, we are the winners, the fans. And it's just getting started, folks. Pretty soon you're going to hear and see arguments online. Social media did not exist during the previous ratings war. So it's going to get vocal. It's going to get ugly enough where you're going to have just fans go after each other instead of just focusing on the fact that, hey, why can't we just enjoy professional wrestling for what it is? And just nitpick the real bullshit when it comes to lack of story angles, lack of people being properly used or pushed or given opportunities and stuff like that. Reasons why they leave, talent that is, leave in the first place. Do you think their reason for leaving is, this week's shows were much lower than last week's, I'm resigning, I'm putting in my notice? Come on, folks. It's time to get your heads out of the dirt like the ostriches and just focus on what's really more important when it comes to professional wrestling, and that's being entertained. So I mentioned that the old Jack Swagger or Jack Hager debuted towards the end of AEW Dynamite. So Tony Khan, he would explain this week that Jake was already signed ahead of time, and there were arrangements made and a deal reached between he, AEW, and Bellator, where he's able to have specific days of the week where he can train for his MMA career, and have Wednesday nights, ironically the same nights as Dynamite, when he's off between training and scheduled Bellator appearances or press conferences, and have the remaining of the weekends that wouldn't conflict with upcoming AEW pay-per-views and Bellator events. And everybody agreed. Sounds like a much better deal than whatever Lashley got. Hell, even a better deal than what Lesnar got. At least we know Jake will show up. And now Bobby Lashley is back from knee injury. Was it a knee injury? Well, he's back from injury. But I don't think he's balancing his MMA career with WWE. At least not how he did with Impact Wrestling. But it's possible. All I'm saying, it is possible. So AEW, now this is confirmed from PWInsider.com, that AEW now has a new TV deal with TSN. And they began said broadcast same night, just like everyone else, on October 2nd. This deal was accomplished much later on than the TNT deal. But now Canadian fans can enjoy the Wednesday Night War as well. For those wondering of the mix and matching and changes of order and scheduling between all the shows, a little TV show known as 205 Live seemingly got lost in the shuffle, but there's new life for them as they will now air once again on the WWE Network, but on Friday nights instead, live after SmackDown goes off the air. And all is well in the world, I guess. Once again, multiple wrestling shows to watch. If you're interested, that is. Another botch that was, I completely forgot this, during the Baron Corbin botch with the throne. But when Ric Flair was announced, his Minitron said that he's a 17-time world champion. I know the 6 is right next to the 7 on the keyboard, but geez, this is why we have rehearsals, people. So many believe that, wait a minute, did Ric Flair win a 24/7 title that we're not aware of, and that added to his 16 reigns as world champion? No, folks, it was just a complete botch, a complete typo on whomever was in charge of that technicality. But no, Ric Flair is not a matter of fact, he's not even a 16 or 17-time world champion. He's more than that. I would say closer to 22, if I'm not mistaken. And this is not from the NWA, WCW, or WWE. He's been in so many other smaller territories back in the day in the 70s and the early 80s, winning titles left and right. But either because those organizations were so small and unrecognizable in their territories, not even bought out by others to be merged, they just don't exist. So in hindsight, yeah, 16 is just about right. I'm sure someone's going to correct me and say, well, no, it's actually 25 or 27 or whatever it is, which I'll be okay with. But it just really sucks that WWE does not acknowledge every single title that Flair's won. I mean, they have this huge monopoly in their network. So many different companies that they bought out for their video libraries. Not specifically, but, it came with the deal. So why not acknowledge those other world title wins? Mysterio is in full support of his son Dominic following in his footsteps to become a professional wrestler. As even Dominic has mentioned, he has been training. He's taken a few bumps. Maybe more than a few. But he's being trained by Lance Storm, one of the greatest of all time. Especially when it comes to in-ring technical work, like a Bret Hart, like a Chris Benoit. Lance is one of the best ones. Can be in better hands. And hopefully when he recovers from his bone-shattering suplexes this past week and is out of intensive care, not that we're expecting, please don't have a Brock Lesnar versus Dominic match. What? Saying that out loud, somebody in WWE must have picked up the vibe and say, we got to have this in 2 weeks, guys. Lesnar versus Dominic for payback or some shit. Please don't do that. 2-on-1 maybe with his father, but 1-on-1, no. No. Mentioned earlier, Rusev has become an American citizen. Finally, after 14 years in the country, he took to Instagram to announce to the world that it finally happened. He has become an official United States citizen. And you see Rusev in the photograph holding a small American flag and recounts just how long of a road it's been since that moment. And 14 years. That is amazing. I mean, I've known people personally that it's taken much longer than that. But I think the processes are a little different now, where things can happen a little bit quicker. I mean, 14 years is a much shorter reign of waiting compared to, say, 20 or 30 years. Yeah, times have changed. Not always for the better, but it's at least as progress moving forward. Very slowly, but it's working out for everyone. Now, perhaps one of the stories that's generating some buzz, I think others like me are a little bit skeptical about this. And no matter what, I'll be fine, depending on the end result of this. Either way, I'll be okay with. But I'm talking about CM Punk and his deal with Fox, not WWE, but Fox. As Fox is working on a new TV show called WWE Backstage that will air on FS1 after SmackDown goes off the air. And that CM Punk could be a host on said show. And both parties, WWE and Fox, have come out and say this Fox show that's named after WWE will not have or doesn't have WWE insight, and it's not created by them, which I'm sure Vince would eventually, if he hasn't already, have some issue with. But if you really want to piss off Fox, company that just gave, or the network that just gave you $1 billion. So people are buzzing over CM Punk potentially returning to the company now that Triple H has weighed in as well. He was asked about the potential, maybe, kind of, shoulda, woulda, coulda, of working with, as an analysis, CM Punk that is, for Fox, and if he would like to see Punk back in the company of WWE. Now, this was asked to Triple H by CagesideSeats.com. And he was very clear, Triple H was, as I mentioned, about the who's involved, whose idea is, and so on and so forth. So this is what Triple H had to say. To be clear, Fox is doing this show. It's their show, and it's something they're doing to talk about the WWE Universe and everything going on in it. Triple H will go on to say, they've had a long list of people they've been interviewing and everything, but as far as for us, one of the things I think this company has shown over and over again is never say never. So as far as a return goes, Triple H doesn't see that happening in the immediate future, but isn't one to rule out. He will say, if the opportunity is right for everybody and it's right for our fans, like really, then we are willing to put the past behind us and move forward. So I would say never, but that's also probably a long way from coming to. I don't know. That's also a little bit of outside of my purview now. But like I said, never say never. So in other words, even though Triple H is in charge of talent relations, he can't say whether or not for sure as he would like to see CM Punk back in the WWE. He's a guy, he's the one that created, well, recreated or brought back from the ashes NXT to be his playground, so to speak, for untapped talent from around the world and bring them together under one umbrella to maybe become future WWE superstars on main rosters. We've seen comebacks from previous independent wrestlers or former WWE superstars and whatnot go through NXT or go straight to the main roster, whether or not it had any insight from Triple H, but he's the executive vice president of talent relations. It's in the title itself, talent and relations. You have to relate to said talent to whether or not be part of the company or not, as an on-air talent or a performer or wrestler, what have you. I mean, what's Triple H really trying to say? Like, yeah, don't really, yeah. It's no secret, and history has shown that Triple H, among others, can hold long-term grudges. And if it's not that, even if it's not directly towards them or about them, it could have been with someone holding a grudge against Vince McMahon or Vince holding a grudge against someone else, and it passes on to either Triple H or Stephanie. And now they're the ones carrying that burden because, oh, you couldn't do business with my father, or you insulted my dad by saying this and that or doing this. Then why isn't Hulk Hogan part of that argument? And he's back with the company. Chris Jericho, despite asking numerous times permission from Vince to do certain deals with New Japan and AAA and doing all sorts of other independent appearances, Vince always gave his blessing. But ultimately, Vince realized, wait a minute, Jericho's getting all this money and none of it's coming to us? Yeah, we got to part ways. Now, does Jericho hold a grudge against Vince? Not really, but, he'll call bullshit when there's bullshit. Triple H and And Jericho had been seen before since Jericho's departure from WWE at private ceremonies such as Ric Flair's birthdays, for example. So I doubt there's going to be any, or that there is any personal grudges there. But like he says, never say never. So moving on, now let's look at the CM Punk side of things. As reports have come out that CM Punk was at Fox Studios earlier this week in Los Angeles for a possible on-screen role for WWE Backstage on FS1. Speculations regarding his status with WWE has sparked, but since we just heard from Triple H, that more than likely is not going to happen. But we've been swerved before, right? Every time it says, well, we've been swerved before. So again, either way, I wouldn't hold my breath. Wrestling Observer has provided an update about CM Punk. Noted that the feeling is that Punk's tryout went well with Fox and that he will probably get an offer to join the show. So nothing's official yet. With Fox overseeing all production of the series, Punk would technically be working for Fox and not WWE. Well, that's a no-brainer. By now we all know that it's a Fox show that happens to have a show named after WWE, just like NFL on Fox, the pre-show, and the halftime show, which is full of former retired and Hall of Fame football players. And well, sometimes you have a current talent that's on hiatus or is out due to injury or what have you. But this would be similar to that, where you got a former WWE talent and Fox wants to have a WWE show. Why not get a former WWE talent? Because everybody else seems to be too busy anyway to be, traveling and appearing in other shows. Have a former WWE talent be the host or the co-host or what have you. Who knows how many more people are going to join this panel? So that's one way to look at it and makes sense. So Meltzer will go on as he's speculating on the episode that WWE may not want to put up a fight with Fox. I mentioned this earlier. And is interested in Punk, as would also keep him away from AEW. Because that's another argument and conversation that's been going on as well. What's CM Punk's relations with AEW? I mean, he's appeared at StarCast for the first time earlier. Matter of fact, a few weeks ago for All Out. The weekend of All Out pay-per-view. It was noted that AEW officials told Meltzer that they would never work with Punk due to his comments made in an interview with ESPN in July, where he had negative comments to say about AEW when asked about his relationship with the company. That's understandable, but at the same time, could all that be forgiven and compared to what transpired between Punk, Triple H, and Vince McMahon, 5 years ago now? So Punk remains firm in his statements that he doesn't want to wrestle anymore, saying that it holds no interest for him. However, everything else is seemingly to be on the table, as he was quoted, "I'm very much in a position in my life where I'm like, well, talk to me. I'm open to anything. And if they come at me and they're like, we want you to wrestle, I'm not interested. I've grown so much as a person, and I look back at all the stuff and I don't need it. I don't need the confrontation and I don't need the drama. I'm a businessman, but I put my morals and integrity above business deals. If you want me to do anything, talk to me, but don't waste my time." I think that's fair of a statement to make. He's made it clear several times despite being asked, and he's been very professional and very humble in answering questions from fans at Q&A sessions or Comic-Cons. I'm pretty sure he did it at StarCast. There might be a YouTube video up somewhere where he was asked about wrestling again. But in all fairness, not all the fans are asking about him going back to WWE. Come on, if you're a true WWE /CM Punk /wrestling fan and listen to a word that this man said post WWE legal actions. What was it, 2004, for Thanksgiving, that weekend, when he did the Colt Cabana podcast. And everything that went down from his side of view of things, although a lot can be proven and has been seen before, everything else is pretty difficult to prove as far as fact from CM Punk's point of view. But if you heard, and go back to, I mean, yeah, it's 2 hours long, but if you go back and listen to that again, it's so disheartening. From the lump on his back, from being injured intentionally or not, from the lack of response, from the officials allegedly wanted him to perform more overseas regardless of his injuries that he's pointed out several times, and that the doctor allegedly ignored a lot of his symptoms or might have misdiagnosed him. Who knows? But yet the same fans, a lot of them who listen to that, like, hey man, when are you going back to WWE to wrestle again? Did you not hear his story of what he went through just to get out of it? But he's speaking in general about wrestling at all. And even if it's with AEW, to do anything with them, to be a backstage interviewer, a manager, commentator, as far as I can see, everything is filled. I mean, again, AEW is still beginning. They're still in the very, very early stages of their existence. So if other positions open up later on, maybe they can go back to CM Punk when the dust settles from these comments made on ESPN a few months ago and all is forgiven. They could talk again, but Punk can contribute a lot to AEW. It's just a matter of how and where. With this Fox show, obviously Punk won't be wrestling. At least I hope he doesn't on stage or on the office chair or the desk or whichever way the setup is going to be. And he has a lot of inside knowledge. He's a very intelligent man when it comes to pro wrestling from the past. Who's been where and done what. So let's say they just finished and wrapped up an episode of Smackdown. You jump over to WWE backstage and there's Punk and his co-host discussing what just happened. If it was you, what would you have done? Did you see this coming? What does this mean? Does this remind you of anything? You know, stuff like that. And Punk will have a direct, honest, open answer for you. It won't be scripted. It won't be rehearsed, this and that, which I doubt, hopefully, what these Fox shows don't do, especially, like I said earlier, the NFL pre-show and the halftime show and whatnot. None of that scripted. We just saw what happened, so let's discuss it. Was the referee justified in having a penalty called on that play, despite not reversing the decision? That's how you analyze, folks, when it comes to sports. But yes, pro wrestling, according to WWE and Vince McMahon, it's not a sport, even though they're getting sports money. So we don't know yet. Nothing's etched in stone just yet to exactly what's going to happen with CM Punk as far as being involved with FS1 and WWE backstage, despite having his interview, I guess, or his meetings with Fox officials earlier this week that it went well, according to Dave Meltzer. I wouldn't be surprised, and you know what? It would be great. But Punk will answer to Fox more than he would answer to WWE or anything. So if it's going to be a discussion about, well, be careful what you say and this and that, no, then he wouldn't be CM Punk, now would he? I don't know the man personally. I never met the man. I would love to. As a matter of fact, I had I'm sure I mentioned this once a long time ago, but there's a diner in Queens, New York, and just came back from hanging out in the city and heading home. Usually I would stop by and get a bite to eat and then go home. So I go to this particular diner, which has been a regular for me. And from a distance, leaving the diner, I saw Maria. And at the time, she was dating CM Punk. And when I did a double take, yeah, that was Maria. And I looked a little for, oh shit, CM Punk. So I just missed the man from meeting him, and they were with a third party. I don't remember who that was. So yeah, that was the closest I ever got to meet CM Punk. I will eventually meet Maria much later on, before she ended up marrying Mike Kanellis and having, now about to have a second child. So let's see what happens, folks, between CM Punk, Fox, and WWE. Just reaching the finishing line here, folks, so no worries. According to Fightful.com, Sasha Banks has extended her contract, which is interesting to me, considering what took place post-WrestleMania and the alleged temper tantrum, and whether it happened or not, whether there's footage of it or not, whether Sasha Banks admitted it on her opening promo when she returned or not. I found that, wow, okay, I guess cooler heads prevail, and it doesn't change the fact that Sasha was upset with her direction her character was going and so forth. And now she's locked in with a feud with Becky Lynch, the biggest moneymaker right now as far as the women's division goes, and she's a champion. And now they're going to have a high-profile match inside Hell in a Cell for the women's title, or the Raw women's title. So the terms of the deal were not disclosed, according to Fightful, but in a report outside of the simple facts that Banks agreed to the deal upon her return. While many rumors regarding Banks extending her contract in 2018 have surfaced, it's unknown whether those were true or involved her extension currently. So a lot of mix and matching here of the dots, what really led to her final decision to extend her contract. But at the end of the day, one of the main reasons would be like, well, we don't want you to go to AEW. You're going to see a lot of that, folks. So regardless if anyone's happy with the status in WWE and the contracts are about to expire, yeah, there's that clause that WWE could extend it for another year without you knowing, you being the talent. And, okay, I'll just stick around for another year and not sign after that, because by then, WWE has no more cards to play with. They just use their only card to use is not to automatically extend it. So Luke Harper, who made his return recently, was sitting at home collecting that WWE money and could easily, because right now he's in that extended period. So depending how well or successful this feud goes and moving forward to the next one and so on and so forth, by next year's WrestleMania, Harper could now have a change of heart and say, you know what, I like how things are better now compared to a year ago. Let me sign a new contract. The decision at the end of the day is ultimately Harper's. But now with this extension, it's an extension, not a new contract. It's extended. So WWE still has that play card over Sasha Banks to extend it yet another year when this current one expires. So if anyone's expecting Sasha Banks to jump to AEW anytime soon, nah, don't hold your breath on that either. Meltzer also reported that Dane, wow, not Dane. I don't think there's a Dane Velasquez out there, but no relations maybe. But Cain Velasquez recently had a meeting with WWE. Now this happens after his debut in AAA, and even had a meeting with New Japan a few weeks ago. So there's a lot of interest in Cain Velasquez, former UFC World Heavyweight Champion. Velasquez also planned to meet with AEW, but no final decision has been made by Velasquez himself. But it should be noted that he's still under contract at UFC. Probably why he wore a mask when he wrestled in AAA a few weeks ago. Cain has gone on record saying that he's very interested in what AEW is doing right now. And he's also teamed up with Cody back in Triple Mania, which is Triple A's main show of the year. One of Ring of Honor's biggest stars has gone under the knife, that being a Bandido, earlier this week. And the severity of the injury is currently unknown, but the Bandido used, quote, 7 weeks of hashtags, more than likely indicating how long he will be out of action. So we don't know what the injury is or what kind of surgery he received, but hashtag 7 weeks more likely is referring to how long he'll be out of action. But I think Bandido, well, his look is awesome, by the way. And it's a great talent in the ring. And it really sucks to hear something like this. But I guess try to get as many, and this is going to sound real bad, but try to get all these injuries early in your career out of the way. You fix it with surgery and then move on back to the career, back in the ring. And you'll learn better from next time not to repeat whatever you did, whether it was a botched move or an accident, to avoid it again. Because as human beings, instinctively, you try to avoid deja vu when it comes to injury. Like, well, I'm not going to slip and fall this time. I'm going to be really smart, maybe walk around it or just not walk over it at all. Maybe ice, maybe a slick road or whatever made you slip the first time. And finally, Mickie James shared an interview on MickieJames.com speaking about her wide range in several wrestling topics. Even spoke about her new commentary role with WWE for Main Event, saying during commentary for Main Event, I was surprised WWE even offered the opportunity, but I was very excited to jump on board. It's good to be back on the road with the crew and to call matches of superstars you don't always get to see on the main broadcast, which is unfortunately sad and true. But Mickie James is also continuing with her singing career in country music, which is very enjoyable. If you haven't had a chance already, spare a few minutes, go to YouTube, look for her channel, Mickie James, and take a listen. I think you'll thoroughly enjoy her singing talents. I mean, we've always known about this even back when she was in Impact Wrestling. But more so now that she's balancing music career and wrestling career, not so much in the ring anymore, but for commentating and music, her voice is being heard all over the place. And that's a plus for her. So with that said, SmackDown is tonight, debuting on Fox. For the first time since 92, they had, 92? Man, when was that? They had two Saturday night's main events on Fox. Yeah, it was 92. The last one being Bret Hart defending the WWE title against Papa Shango, Ultimate Maniacs against Money Inc. for the tag titles, and when Shawn Michaels defeated Davey Boy Smith for the Intercontinental title. So it was a triple header main event, so to speak, and that was the last time Fox had WWE on their programming. And growing up, before Fox was Fox, at least in New York, every weekend, Superstars of Wrestling and Wrestling Challenge on Channel 5 in New York. But they make their long-awaited return tonight. The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Sting, Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Lita, Goldberg, and so many more expected to show up on the premiere episode of SmackDown. Now, see, now I'm talking like them, like every other sentence I'm saying that. But yes, I will definitely watch the show. I'll have highlights, maybe not too many results, but highlights next week on the JM Report, as I'm still debating how exactly to reschedule myself here in order to have all the shows under one umbrella, under one show, and have all the results for you, thus making this show even longer. As you know, look, I'm pushing the 2-hour mark now, which I used to do a lot of, but then I decided, well, let's just discuss more of the important stories. But now every week, there's so many wrestling shows, and that's not me even covering Impact or WOW or New Japan, but doesn't mean I won't discuss what's going on with them once in a while. But yeah, this show is just going to get much longer, so I got to find ways to simplify it best way as possible. So with that said, everyone, thank you for joining in. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Autumn is here, so start bundling up, as winter has already made their presence made their presence known up north with a few winter storms already. So yeah, stay warm. So everyone, be good, behave. Good old JM. Till next time.
Open your mind and realize that your beautiful world could take my life. And I'm sinking under, drowning faster. Please just let me breathe.